Hi, everybody. I'm Bucky.
And I'm Paul, and we're here from Paul and Bucky's Skills for Life.
And in today's video, we're going to talk a little bit about stress and what it is and what are some signs and symptoms to watch out for and how you can help yourself in stressful situations, including good ways to deal with stress and some not so good ways to deal with stress. So basically, stress is defined as your body's response to either a physical, mental, or emotional pressure of some sorts. So a physical response might be you go outside and it's chilly since it's winter time, and you decide your body says you better get a jacket on. So you go in and you get your jacket. Um, an emotional stress could be breaking up of a relationship. Maybe you've lost a loved one, or maybe just you're experiencing some conflict in your life, and all these things can cause stress. And we call those things stressors, those things that cause stress for ourselves. And certain stressors can be different for different people. So what may cause one person stress the other person might not feel as much stress under that same experience. So basically, stress has a bad name, I think. Stress, you often hear people say, well, I'm stressed out, or that person is stressing me. But really, stress is actually an important part of our survival, and stress can be good. Having some stress in your life can help motivate you. Like, let's say that you're trying to reach a goal, like you're trying to, you want to hike to the top of Mount Mansfield before the end of the summer. So you keep putting pressure on yourself to try to reach that goal. So that's an example of how stress can be a positive thing. Of course, there's stress is also something that is a survival, is we use for survival, because when we're in a crisis situation, stress helps protect us. And you've probably heard of the term fight or flight response, and that is something where basically you're in a heightened state. There's basically cortisol in your brain that's being produced and going out to your body. Your blood pressure goes up, your heart starts to beat more, you may start to sweat. So this, for example, these are, if you're in a burning building, your fight or flight response kicks in and you escape the building. There may be a situation where you may use a fight response. And I always like to tell the story of my dad used to tell me when I was a kid. When he was young, he got, I don't know what he did, but he got sent to his room by his parents. And he said he was so angry. And he was just a little tyke at the time, but he got up to his room and he shut his door and he took a dresser that was in his room and weighed a lot, and he pushed the dresser next to the door so no one could come in. And so obviously at the time he was pushing the dresser, he was definitely in fight mode. But when he relaxed, he couldn't move the dresser away from the door. So he was basically stuck in his room. And so he had to call to his parents. And my grandfather eventually came up and was able to nudge the door enough to get into the room to move the dresser. So that's just an example of the fight response that you could have. The other thing stress can definitely be, can have negative effects on you. And this is probably what we're so used to hearing about. Things like I said before, you could have some sort of conflict in your life or whatever. And so the stress, or it could be something could be stressing you that's sort of building or mounting, and it seems to be getting worse every day. And this is the type of stress that can really have a toll on people if they don't manage it or get some help for it, and it can really cause people to be anxious. It can cause depression. So it really can have a negative effect on you also. Um, I think Paul's going to talk a little bit about recognizing some signs and symptoms of stress.
Yes, thank you, Bucky. That was a great sum up of what stress looks like. And I think you might notice when you're stressed, when one, you feel really tired. You might feel yourself being a little irritable. Um, Perhaps you are snapping at people a little more than you would normally. Maybe your normally happy self. Um, and people might say things, and you might take them more personally than you would normally. Sometimes you might have a little trouble sleeping because you're thinking about things a lot, and sometimes you might have racing thoughts, and you're really worried about what might happen. And like you said, I think back in the day we used to run from things like saber-toothed tigers, and our body knew when the danger was over, and it would bring us back to a period of rest. Well, today some of the complicated things that bring up our fight or flight mode are things that necessarily happen over a long period of time. Like, let's say I have an exam coming up and I'm really stressed about it. Then I might hold that stress for days or weeks at a time, which isn't really good for our body. We have a hormone called cortisol that builds up in our system, and it really is good when we need it. But over the long term, it can wear down our system and make us sick. So it's really important that we take care to bring our body back to what we call a relaxed state. And we notice when we start to get overstressed, and that stress is starting to have a negative impact with some of the symptoms that we just talked about.
All right. So what do we do? How can we live our lives to their fullest with all this stress going on? And I mean, I guess the first question is, I mean, obviously, if is this an emergency? Is the world falling apart, or is this something that we assume is an emergency, and it's not necessarily an emergency? So being able to assess the stressors that you're dealing with is important. Um, so Also, sometimes we're human beings, and accepting your feelings and embracing your imperfections is always, be very helpful. Appreciate the fact that you are human, and focus on the positive things that people say to you, or do something nice for someone else. That can be very helpful. Nutrition and sleep is critical for dealing with stress, and that's something that you just don't do when you're stressed, but it's something you should do on a regular basis to help you deal with the stressors in your life. Exercise is a great way. Exercise releases endorphins in your body, which help reduce your perceptions of pain, and also produce positive feelings. I don't know if you've ever heard of some people who run, they talk about a runner's high. That's from those endorphins. And so it's really important to build some sort of exercise into your life. Again, this isn't something you would just do when you're stressed, but something you could do on a regular basis. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to run 10 miles a day to exercise. You can go for a walk. That's very helpful. I know that's something I've been doing a lot during this time of COVID, and it's been really helpful just to get outside and sort of let my mind go. The other thing in letting my mind go and trying to remove all those thoughts that are jumping around, and maybe some of that negative energy is in there, is trying to be mindful. And mindfulness is proven to really help manage stress. So, you can do different things for mindfulness. Some people like just to sit still, to try to just focus on being in the present. Some people, like myself, I like to be outdoors when I am mindful, but definitely a practice that's very helpful in dealing with stress. Um, Crying it out. Sometimes you've always heard, you need a good cry. Um, that can be really, really helpful. And um, using distractions. Distractions can help you too. I know that, like, if you're in a really stressful situation, sometimes with students is I'll do, find 5 things that are red in the room or green in the room, and getting your mind off of what's happening at the moment and looking for those things around the room. But things like puzzles, listening to music, writing, reading, baking, cooking, um, doing your favorite hobby, whatever that may be. All those types of things, all those types of distractions are really helpful in helping you manage the stressors in your life. Um, so I think,
And one thing I wanted to add too, Bucky, is how much our perspective can add to our stress. Sometimes
yeah,
perfectionism, when we hold ourselves to a higher standard. And I feel like a middle standard, like some stress is good. If we didn't have any stress, we probably wouldn't get much done. But having a little stress is okay. But sometimes we beat ourselves up or push ourselves a little too hard. Um, and we have to challenge ourselves and our perspective to be or sometimes even the perspective of others. Sometimes people present us with what they think are emergencies. And sometimes it's like, well, maybe it's not an emergency. Another thing I like to think about is maybe making a list of what I can do about my stress, and I sit down and then I do the things on the list that I can do. Like, let's say, a good example, I have a big test coming up. Well, if I sit down and I study for an hour, then I've done what I could for that hour. And then for the next 3 hours, I'm going to use distraction to sort of help myself not think about that and not get caught up in the negative thought process, and maybe using some mindfulness. Like, whenever the stress or the fear comes up, I just kind of let that go a little bit. And I really enjoy things like yoga, which are really helpful to move my
yeah,
body so that I can release some of the physical, not just the mental stress, but help my body to relax a bit.
yeah.
Um, so I did want to just mention that we do have some negative coping skills sometimes that come up for stress, and I want to say they're negative coping skills because, to be honest, sometimes they can work, which is not necessarily good. Like drugs or alcohol, like when you smoke marijuana or you drink alcohol, that does have the effect of reducing some of the stress. It helps calm your body and takes away some of the stress, but it also might have some negative when they're used in a way that's clearly just to get, instead of, sometimes people use them socially, but when those things are used to reduce stress on a regular basis, then they have some negative consequences that can come from that. So being careful that looking at how you reduce your stress, and sometimes some of those stressors may cause more or those de-stressors may cause more problems in the long run. Like if I, abuse alcohol and then I start, missing work or school, that although I'm not feeling the stress as much, that tends to make my situation even worse and will ultimately lead to more stress. So just be careful of if you do find you're having some negative coping skills, then find positive ones to replace them. Sometimes those negative coping skills, we feel like those are all we have. But then when we try and add new coping skills, then we'll find we need those negative ones less and less.
Thank you, Paul. Um, I wanted to just talk about some of the things that some of my favorite stress reducers that I've been doing during COVID, and maybe Paul, you can share some of yours too. But for me, definitely, like I said before, I like to go out and walk or run. I do run also, but I have a dog, and the dog needs to be walked, so that sort of helps. But it's definitely a way to get outside, and for me, just to sort of try to let those stressors not think about them and maybe focus more on my breathing, and just the feeling of being outside. So that's been really helpful. Um, uh, I know part of this pandemic has included social isolation. So even though Zoom is not, actually replacing being in person with other people, it's really sort of helped me connect with friends and family, especially around the holidays. It's been really important for me to be able to not only to talk to people, but when you see them too, I think it really adds something. Um, so I've been doing that. I've started to do a lot of reading, which I'm not really a reader, but I've found during the pandemic that I've really gotten into reading more. And so that's been a good distraction for me. Uh, so those are some of the things that I've been doing that have really helped me deal with this situation. What about you, Paul? Do you have some
Hmm.
favorite stress reducers that you've been using now, or maybe you've been using before COVID?
Yes, I love to do things like drawing. Um, and if you look behind me in my background, this is a picture that I took in a walk in the woods. So I love taking photography, and it helps me sort of forget the things that are going on outside and me be right in the moment and just taking a picture of something really beautiful. Um, I like to play, and this one could be both a positive and a negative stress. I like to play video games sometimes because it just lets me be in another world, and I get to be in that environment. But it could be negative if I use that as a way not to distract when I might be stressed and I've done everything I can, but as a way to avoid. So I want to make sure that when I do play video games, I'm not using it as a way to avoid feelings or avoid um, difficult things in my life that are calling for my attention, but as a way to just kind of relax after I've, kind of taken the steps that I can take. Um, and like I said, I love things like yoga. I love talking with people. And when I'm really stressed, it's very helpful to find someone who can listen to me. And often I will let them know what I need when they listen. I might say, I don't necessarily need any feedback right now. I just want you to hear and give me the space to talk about what's going on. And that's helpful. Or I might say, do you have any thoughts for me? Um, but just communicating with my friends, like what I need in that moment, is really helpful. Um, and I have great friends who will often provide me that and give that to me. So and you can be a friend and help someone else who's stressed out too, just by listening to them non-judgmentally and letting them just talk about what's on their mind without giving them advice or thoughts.
Definitely, those are some excellent stress reducers. So I was just gonna when what you just said too. I think it's important to be able to ask for help. Um,
Hmm.
Sometimes I think um, we don't want to burden other people or whatever, and we keep it inside. And sometimes it's good just to ask for help and from someone from a trusted friend or adult, and just say, hey, like you said before, maybe it's not as much as you don't need to fix things for me, but just sort of let me talk about what's going on for me. And um, you know, um, I think the most important thing in that situation is it's going to be someone who's going to listen to you and someone who probably really cares about you also. So
Hmm.
um, so that can be really really helpful.
I think another important thing, Bucky, is that when you talk about asking for help, that I think it actually really takes a lot of strength, because and it's a real gift when we let someone help us because we're being vulnerable to them, which, and I think sometimes that can be really hard, especially for men, to be vulnerable to others and to say, I need help. But it actually takes a lot of strength. And it's a real gift to let someone help you because you're allowing them to see yourself, maybe not when you're feeling your best. And when we do that, that usually makes the other person feel really grateful and connected to us in a way that we might not suspect. We might think people will think that we're weak, but in reality, a lot of people find that it brings us closer together and really shows vulnerability and strength to be able to share with others and let them know that you need help on something. We all
So
need help.
yeah. Well, I think one of the things that because for everybody, there's people have different ways of managing their stress and what they do to help themselves. And so we would like to really hear from you, our listeners. And by the way, thank you for listening.
Yes.
We definitely appreciate it. But let us know in our make in our comments some of the things that you do, the positive things that you do to help yourself with stress, because there's probably a million different things that people do to help themselves with stress. So so let us know. We'd really like to hear from you about things that you do to for stress, and just if you have any comments in general, we'd love to hear from you.
Yes. So stay safe out there. Please take care of yourself. And if you're feeling stressed, go look at this list that we've given you and some of the things that you other folks write down below, and try those out and give yourself a break. And thank you so much. Go ahead and hit that like button if you like what we're talking about, and feel free to share this video with everyone that you think could be benefit from this. So thank you.